I still remember the last dinner I ever had with my family. Not because it was special, but because it was the moment they made it clear I wasn't welcome anymore. I was 19, freshly graduated from high school, and full of dreams. I didn't want to be a dentist like my mother, nor did I want to take over my father's accounting firm like he always expected. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to paint, design, create. I wanted to breathe without asking permission. But in my house, dreams were dangerous, especially mine. That night, the dining table was set like always. Perfect napkin folds, overcooked steak, and silence thick with judgment. I had finally worked up the courage to say it. I've decided. I'm not going to university. I want to build something on my own. My mother dropped her fork. My father didn't even blink. Then came the laughter. First from my younger brother, Calvin. His smirk was sharp enough to cut glass. You? Build something? Evelyn, you can't even keep your room clean. I held my ground. I'm serious. My mother finally spoke. You'll be nothing but a disappointment without a degree. You'll come crawling back, my father added. And when you do, don't expect help. I stared at them, hoping someone would say I believe in you, but all I got was a plane ticket to get my head straight and an ultimatum. Either follow their path or get out. That night, I packed my sketchbook, 2 shirts, 1 hoodie, and $58 I had saved from tutoring kids in the neighborhood. No hugs, no tears, just the cold sound of the front door locking behind me. The first night, I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have a place to go. I wandered for hours until I found a 24-hour laundromat that didn't ask questions. I curled up on the hard bench and stared at my sketchpad, unsure whether to cry or draw. I drew. My hands shook as I shaded lines, but it felt like the only thing that still belonged to me. I sketched my mother's cold stare, my father's indifferent eyes, my brother's mocking smile. Page after page, I bled. At 4:23 a.m., a woman folding laundry stopped in front of me. You drew that? I looked up. She had tired eyes and smelled like detergent, but her voice was kind. It's beautiful. I'd pay for something like that. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She handed me a crumpled $20 bill. That was the first time I ever got paid for my art. I didn't realize it then, but that moment would plant the seed for everything that came after. Daybreak decisions. By morning, I had decided one thing. If my family wanted me to fail, I'd do everything in my power to prove them wrong. Not loudly, not with posts or public revenge. Quietly, methodically, with every line I drew. I found a diner hiring for overnight shifts. The manager, a no-nonsense woman named Carla, hired me on the spot when I told her I had nowhere else to go. I washed dishes at night, slept in the back room with borrowed blankets, drew every spare minute I had. Customers started to notice, especially when I began taping my sketches to the break room wall. One afternoon, a man in a tailored coat came in for coffee. He stared at one of my drawings, a cityscape in charcoal. How much for this? He asked. I stuttered, I don't know, $50? He paid $500. And at the turning point. That was the second time someone paid me for my art, and it made me realize my family might have cut me off, but they didn't kill me. They lit a fire. I wasn't just drawing anymore. I was building, quietly, alone, with grit they never knew I had. And in that silence, while they laughed at the memory of the daughter they believed would fail, I was sketching the blueprint of a future they'd never see coming. They thought I'd crawl back. For the first few weeks after I left, I waited for a message, a phone call, some kind of regret. But my phone stayed silent, except for an automated email from my father's office, formally removing me from the family trust. So I did the same. I stayed silent. No posts, no updates, no pleas for help. I became invisible. And in that invisibility, I found freedom. The diner that saved me. For nearly 2 years, I worked overnight shifts at Carla's diner, flipping pancakes and washing plates. By day, I drew. Not for social media, not for praise, just to survive. I learned how to stretch $12 across 3 meals, how to live with strangers, how to let go of shame. Carla eventually gave me a tiny room above the diner. It smelled like bacon grease and dust, but it was mine. It had a desk, a mattress, and a window that faced the alley, but that window gave me light. And light meant I could draw longer. One evening after my shift, Carla walked in holding a package. Some art dealer called for you, she said. Asked if the girl from the sketches would take a commission. I blinked. You gave them my number? She shrugged. You deserve to be seen. Asking a name without a face. The dealer's name was Nathaniel Brooks. He ran a boutique studio in Portland and had somehow found my work through a random Pinterest post a customer had shared. He asked if I had a portfolio. I didn't. He asked if I had a name. I hesitated. Then I said Eva Lynn. Eva from Evelyn, Lynn as in line, because all I had were lines. I created a fake email, a new identity. A shell persona with no social media presence, no ties, no past, just art. Eva Lynn became a whisper in the art world, mysterious, gifted, untraceable. My work sold through Nathaniel's private clients. Wealthy buyers loved the mystery. One day he told me, "Your silence sells." I smiled. They didn't know it was born from exile. Hustling in the digital shadows. I began learning digital design late at night, using free courses from YouTube and discarded library books. I taught myself how to digitize my sketches, animate transitions, and build brand kits. Within 6 months, I was designing logos and packaging for small businesses across Etsy and Shopify, under a second name, Graybrush Studio. I took every penny and reinvested. A refurbished iPad, a used drawing tablet, Adobe Creative Cloud on student discount, thanks to a friend's old email. Then I found Guy, not his real name, of course, but the first person who ever saw Eva Lynn and didn't ask who I was, only what I wanted to build. He was a coder, quiet, brilliant, also living in a room he rented behind a car garage. We met in a Reddit thread about digital branding and started collaborating. In 6 months, we launched our first full-service design studio. No names, no faces. Just anonymous brilliance. Clients didn't care. They loved the results. Loved that we weren't influencers or trend chasers. The turning point. Real money. One morning, I woke up to an email from a luxury hotel chain. They had stumbled upon a wine label I'd designed anonymously and wanted a rebrand. Their budget? $120,000. I didn't believe it at first. I forwarded it to Guy. He called me whispering, "You ready for this?" I wasn't. But I said yes. We worked 14-hour days for 3 weeks straight, blending typography with emotional storytelling, design with memory. When we submitted the final brand kit, the VP emailed back, "Eva Lynn is a genius. Who is she?" I didn't answer. A quiet empire begins. That contract changed everything. We incorporated officially, still using fake names, still fully remote, hired 2 freelancers, then 4, then 8. By year 4, Graybrush Studio was $1 million ghost empire with no public face, no scandals, and no drama. We were the best-kept secret of premium minimalist branding. And I lived in silence. No social media, no birthday posts, no mention of my family. They never once tried to reach out. Not when articles whispered about a reclusive designer changing the aesthetic of high-end branding. Not when a YouTube review of Eva Lynn's design philosophy hit 4.2 million views. They still thought I was struggling somewhere, painting street corners, maybe waitressing part-time. They had no idea I signed multi-6-figure contracts from a sunlit apartment with concrete walls and indoor plants I kept alive myself. Closure brewing. Slowly. Sometimes, Carla still called me. "That family of yours ever check in?" I'd laugh. "Nope." "Good," she'd say. "Don't let them back in just because you're up now. I didn't plan to." But fate had other ideas, because in the 5th year of my silence, a message arrived. From Calvin. Just 5 words. "Do you know Graybrush Studio?" I stared at it, heart still as stone. That was the day I knew. My past was about to walk into the empire I built in silence, and they wouldn't even know who owned the floor they were standing on. I didn't respond to Calvin's message. "Do you know anything about Graybrush Studio?" he'd written, just like that. No greeting, no explanation, no apology. Just a single line from the brother who used to laugh at my dreams and slam the door in my face. I stared at it, unreadable. I didn't reply. 3 weeks later, my HR director forwarded me a list of final candidates for 3 new open positions in our company. I opened the PDF without much thought, skimming, until 3 names stopped me cold. Calvin Moore, Margaret Moore, Gareth Moore, my brother, my mother, my father. I froze. I read through the resumes again and again. They had no idea, no clue whose company they were applying to, no idea that I, Evelyn, was Eva Lynn, that the daughter they once disowned had become the architect of the very empire they were now knocking on the door of. My mother's application was painfully polite, her cover letter full of humble appeals about wanting a fresh start and believing in second chances. My father, once so proud and commanding, had written a simple, short paragraph that made no mention of his past career. Calvin's resume was trying hard to sound mature. Teamwork, resilience, customer focus. They had changed, or at least they were pretending to. I didn't know how to feel. Anger? Triumph? Grief? I called my assistant and gave very clear instructions. Hire all three. No promotions, no VIP treatment. They would enter at the exact roles they applied for. And they were to sign non-disclosure agreements barring them from inquiring about the company's leadership structure. When they started, I watched everything from the shadows. Calvin joined our customer care team. He sat in an open office, surrounded by people he probably used to mock in his youth. His posture was different now, quieter, less entitled. He handled emails from demanding clients and logged customer complaints without fuss. My mother worked in admin. She now answered phones, arranged meetings, made coffee runs, and took notes for managers a third her age. I saw her once reviewing a calendar, squinting as she tried to reschedule a meeting that had double booked. This woman, who once scheduled every minute of my childhood like a drill sergeant, now looked humbled by the pace of work she used to think was beneath her. My father was placed in our logistics department, assisting with physical archives and office supply distribution. He carried boxes through the halls, checked inventory sheets, and quietly did his job with no special privileges. I saw him once lifting a stack of product samples. He looked tired, older, smaller. None of them recognized me. Sometimes I passed them in the hallway, hair tied up, face masked, clipboard in hand, and not one of them paused. I had changed. I didn't need them to see me. They were well liked by their teams, which surprised me. My staff found them polite, capable, respectful. One intern even called my mother sweet but serious. My father was quiet but helpful. Calvin had started cracking jokes in the break room, charming people without his old arrogance. Still, not once did they mention a daughter. Not once did they speak of a sister who had been cast out. I waited, listening for some trace of regret. But silence reigned. And that silence, that was the most satisfying part. Because they were walking my floors, clocking in at my company, answering to a system I built from nothing, and they had no idea. I didn't need to scream my victory. I didn't need to confront them, not yet. Just existing was enough. Existing in the center of the empire they thought I'd never create. That was power. That was peace. And someday soon they'd know. But not yet. It had been nearly 4 months since they started working for me, and the balance of power stayed silent and clean. They worked, they earned, they walked the same halls I designed, answered to the same systems I created, followed the same values I had poured into every inch of Graybrush. And they had no idea. But time has a way of asking for truth. And I knew the day was coming. It started with a conversation I wasn't meant to overhear. I was walking past the staff lounge, quiet, unnoticed, clipboard in hand, when I heard Calvin say something that made me stop. You know, this place feels familiar sometimes. The way they run things, the tone, the structure, even the brand philosophy. I don't know. I've been thinking about Ev lately. My breath caught. The girl they all erased from their lives. My name on his lips again after all these years. He laughed nervously. Probably just guilt. Guilt. I stood there frozen, heart slow, mind racing. It was the first time I heard any of them mention my name, not as a joke, not with disdain, but as a memory, as something unshakable. That night, I made a decision. The annual Graybrush Staff Summit was only 2 weeks away. It was our biggest internal event. Presentations, performances, awards, company updates. For the first time ever, I decided to appear in person. As myself. No Eva Lynn, no masks, no hiding. The invitations went out, the stage was prepared, the lights installed. Staff buzzed with excitement. Calvin's team worked overtime on seating arrangements. My mother helped coordinate catering. My father assisted with shipping printed banners and AV materials to the hotel ballroom. They were planning the event where their world would split open. The day of the summit, the venue buzzed with 200 employees. There was a long stage, a glowing screen with the company logo, and reserved front row seats labeled for standout staff, Calvin, Margaret, Gareth among them. They looked proud, like they belonged. The lights dimmed, music played, the screen pulsed with a countdown. Then silence. A single spotlight fell on the center of the stage, and I stepped into it. No mask, no voice modulation, just me. Evelyn Moore. I saw their faces before I said a word. Calvin blinked in disbelief. My mother's jaw parted. My father's back straightened like he'd seen a ghost. I held the silence for 5 perfect seconds. Then I said, "Thank you all for being here, for believing in this company, and for helping build what no one thought was possible." My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I was the storm that grew quietly until it took the sky. My name is Evelyn Moore. I am the founder, CEO, and creative director of Graybrush Studio. And 5 years ago, I was told I would never survive on my own, that I had no future, that I was expendable. The room was silent. I didn't look directly at them, but I felt their eyes. I kept going. I left home with $58 and a sketch pad. I slept in a laundromat. I worked night shifts, and I built this company from that rock bottom, not with bitterness, not with vengeance, but with relentless belief that I could be more than what I was told I was. I paused, then finally turned to face the front row. Calvin was pale. My mother looked like the air had been knocked from her lungs. My father lowered his eyes. I smiled. I want you all to know, every single person in this room, that this company wasn't built to shame anyone. It was built to prove something. That dignity isn't given, it's claimed. That dreams don't need permission. And that sometimes the people who abandon you are the ones who end up working for you. The room didn't erupt, it froze. And then, applause. Slow, staggered, rising into thunder. I looked out over the sea of faces, some stunned, some tearful, some cheering. And in the center, 3 people who once believed I was nothing, now saw me as everything they never could be. That night, I walked past them backstage. Calvin stood and reached out as if to speak, but I gently raised a hand. "No need," I said. "You've said enough already." I turned and walked into the night, heels tapping like punctuation marks on the final sentence of a chapter they thought I'd never live to write. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The summit had ended only 12 hours ago, but the impact lingered like an aftershock. Emails were pouring in, supportive messages from employees, partners, even competitors. My assistant told me the internal video had already been watched over 500 times and that the press was asking for comment. I ignored them all. I wasn't interested in publicity. I hadn't done it for clicks or fame. I had done it for that girl who once sat alone in a laundromat, drawing in a sketch pad with shaking hands, for the woman I had become. Later that day, I saw them. Calvin came to my office first. He stood outside the glass wall, eyes nervous, unsure whether to knock. I looked up, we locked eyes, and then slowly I nodded. He stepped in, closed the door behind him. The room felt heavy with the weight of all the things that had never been said. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low, "for laughing, for helping them kick you out, for not calling you, for not even trying." He looked older now, not by age but by consequence. I didn't reply at first. I just watched him stand there, wringing his hands like a child. Finally, I said, "You helped build the event that revealed everything. That's more than most would have done." He nodded, then asked quietly, "Do you want me to resign?" "No," I said, "but you'll never get a promotion unless it's earned the hard way, like I did." He nodded again. "That's fair." He left without asking for forgiveness. And that, in itself, was a kind of respect. An hour later, my mother knocked. She wasn't wearing pearls, no polished heels, just simple flats and a cardigan. She stepped into the room, eyes glossy, and sat down without permission. "I always thought I was protecting you," she began, "by forcing structure, by demanding perfection. But I see now, I was just afraid of a daughter I couldn't control." I didn't say a word. She looked up at me, hands trembling. "I was wrong. We were wrong. But you survived. You flourished. And I don't know whether to be proud or ashamed." "Both," I said softly. "Pride isn't real if it doesn't come with truth." She nodded. "Do you want me to leave the company?" "No," I replied, "but you won't refer to me as your daughter in here. I'm your employer. You'll be treated like everyone else." Tears filled her eyes, but she nodded. And then, The last one came. My father didn't knock. He waited outside my office until I noticed him. When I finally waved him in, he didn't speak right away. He just stood there. Then he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I underestimated you." I stared back. "You erased me." He nodded. And then, for the first time in my life, Gareth Moore said something I never expected. "Thank you." For what? For not turning into me. I didn't know what to say. He left without another word. No apology, no excuses, just that. And strangely, it was enough. Weeks passed, the storm settled, people moved on, and so did I. I decided to take a sabbatical, just for 6 weeks, travel, paint, write. The company could run without me for a while. That, too, was a sign of success. Before I left, I visited the storage room, the same space where my father now worked part-time, sorting samples and packaging. I walked to the very back and opened a small fireproof safe. Inside was the original sketch pad, the one I carried when they kicked me out. I flipped through the pages, tears, rage, hope, vision, all still there, pressed in graphite. I took out a marker and wrote on the inside cover. She survived, she built, she forgave. Then I locked it again. That was all the closure I ever needed. I never sought revenge. I just needed the world to see what they tried to bury. And now, they do. They walk my halls. They carry my name on their business cards. And every single day they breathe in the empire I built from nothing, silently, proudly, without ever raising my voice.